President Tinubu's 4th of August speech that was intended to address the concerns of the End Bad Governance protesters seems to have fallen short of expectations. Nigerians are frustrated with the escalating cost of living, ineffective governance, and many say that the president's speech failed to provide a clear plan to alleviate economic hardship.
Now, in his speech, President Tinubu listed several achievements of his administration, one of which is an increase in aggregate government revenues, declaring an increase of over 9.1 trillion naira in the first half of 2024. Now, joining us to discuss some of these economic reforms and their impact so far is economic policy expert and CEO of Nairametrics, Ugodre Obi-Chukwu. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I think the first question has to be, many of the responses, that we saw to the president's speech on Sunday was that none of those figures that he's quoting has any relevance to the reality of the average Nigerian. So I'm going to start with that. How relevant is any of the things that the president said compared to the reality of the average Nigerian?
Well, you have to look at it from two perspectives. One is from the perspective of the president, and of course, the perspective of the people that he's ruling or he's serving. So from the point of view of the president, I think it was important for him to list out some of the things that his administration is doing. I think it would have been wrong for him not to have listed it. Whether you agree with it or not is a different thing. And so what he had done was to say, look, these are the steps that we've taken over the last 1 year. This is why we had to take those steps over the last 1 year. And this is likely what it could mean at the end of the day. But it was a huge disconnect to a lot of Nigerians because those same steps, especially the initial ones that was taken early last year at the time that the administration came into power, were the actual ones that Nigerians feel put them in this situation anyway. So whether it's the fuel subsidy removal or the unification of the exchange rate, a lot of people feel that those twin policies were what basically has cascaded into the economic challenges that we have today. And so you're always going to see those disconnect. And then thirdly, a lot of those policies that he's also reeled out that they have put forward hasn't actually materialized to anything much at the moment. Now, it could be that it's still early times, but Nigerians don't see any difference. So at the end of the day, you can reel out everything that you said you've done. What people are always going to look at is how am I going to afford the next meal? How am I going to be able to transport myself to work? How am I going to be able to buy, drugs, affordable drugs that I can take to, cure whatever illness that I have? These are things that are pertinent to a lot of people. And let's remember that it's the holidays. And so school fees is going to be next on the burner in September. So people don't see any of those policies as having been working at the moment. So for that reason, you're always going to see that disconnect. And then I guess the president also, personally, this is my own opinion, I didn't think that he went far enough in terms of saying, look, these are all the policies and this is what is actually going to lead to. Inflation is going to come down by XXX based on our target. And we're looking at food prices come down by XX based on our target. And I kind of think that gives people something to look forward to. But at the moment, there's really nothing. It was just all about these are the things that we've done. Even though some of those policies haven't actually been implemented yet, there's still policies that are on the table.
All right, let's take a look at some of these policies. We had the graphics put up earlier. I want us to run through some of these policies that the president had spoken about. He said increased aggregate government revenues to over 9.1 trillion naira in the first half of 2024, reduced debt servicing from 97% to 68% in 13 months, cleared legitimate outstanding foreign debt obligations of about $5 billion, set up the Consumer Credit Corporation, that's over 200 billion naira, released 570 billion naira to 36 states to expand livelihood support to citizens, distributed nano grants to 600,000 nano businesses, built 10 MSME hubs creating 240,000 jobs, signed the national minimum wage into law, lowest earning workers to earn at least 70,000 naira monthly, and I believe that that's the most popular one that we've seen. So looking at all these policies that were highlighted, which do you say would be ones that were probably expected to see results as soon as possible? And I like that you've made specifications as to some of the areas in which the president could have, gone a bit further to give reason as to how, or help people see a picture as to what will be different soon. But what immediate measures do you think can be implemented for Nigerians to see a change? So it's more like a 2-in-1 one. Looking at the reforms that we've listed, which one do you think we'll start to see immediate results from? And if you had to advise the president, what measures do you think can be implemented so that we can start to see some form of relief immediately?
All right, so I think probably just go through them one by one. So the first one, which is to increase aggregate revenues, or his increased aggregate revenues to over 9.1 trillion in the first half. Now that was expected because by the time you take subsidy, at least a huge chunk of fuel subsidy off the table, that will free up revenues for the government. And of course, I think there's also been some work in the area of tax collection, custom collection. Let's also remember that part of the revenue increase you're seeing is also because of the exchange rate devaluation that happened last year. So that obviously filtered into government revenue. So in terms of how that affects Nigerians, I don't think that much. Probably means a lot more money for government to spend. And for what we've seen, government spends most of that money on recurrent expenditure anyway and not capital expenditure. So don't think you see that much effect on Nigerians. And now in terms of reducing debt servicing, that also is from the first one as well, because if you're able to increase your revenue, then I think mathematically your debt servicing to revenue ratio will drop. And so going from 97 to 68% is expected because of the increase in revenue. Nevertheless, spending 68% of your revenue in debt servicing also tells you how precarious the situation is, because then you just have 32% left to fund government business or to fund capital and recurrent expenditure. Let's also remember that this is a government that has been borrowing, not just borrowing, but borrowing at actually very high interest rates. Interest rate now is at over 20-something%. So that is also something I don't think that will go down well with Nigerians. And then he also mentions that they've cleared outstanding foreign exchange obligations. Very good development. I think that is one silver lining there. Now, what that means for Nigerians is that you're probably going to see a lot more exchange rate stability, which we've seen over the last 3 months. You've seen the exchange rate go from between 1.5 to 1.6. So that stability is at least good. I hope that they continue to maintain that. And by paying that foreign exchange obligations, what it means is that it instills confidence in the FX market. And so foreign investors can start to bring FX in. But again, that is not happening at the pace that we want. We've seen about $3.9 billion coming in the first quarter of this year, but we expect to see a lot more come in to at least stabilize or give confidence in the foreign exchange market. Now, he also talks about setting up a consumer credit corporation with over 200 billion naira as capital. Now, that hasn't actually materialized too much, because how many people can access that credit scheme? And that's one of those. This is also one of those policies that they haven't fully implemented yet. And 200 billion naira, while significant, I don't think goes enough in terms of the sort of consumer credit gap that you see in Nigeria. Then he also talked about releasing 570 billion naira to 36 states to expand livelihood support to citizens. If this was done, or if this has created the right effect, I think you're not going to see a lot of Nigerians on the streets. Nigerians love to do their business. Nigerians love to live life. So if this money actually touch Nigerians, you will see them on the streets. And of course, he talked about distributing nano grants to 600,000 nano businesses. We've seen some businesses claim that they collected that money, but again, how much is it? What does it really do to their business? Because at the end of the day, by the time you get this money, you probably spend it on by the time you spend it on fuel, or you spend it on paying your existing loans, or even replenishing your inventory, you're probably not going to have anything left, and you can't even pay salaries with that money. So it's pretty difficult for those sort of funding to create the right impact. At best, a lot of the people who collect these nano business loans are probably going to use it to feed their families rather than invest it in their business. And of course, you talked about building 10 MSME hubs and creating 240,000 jobs. I don't know where that data come from. It'd be interesting to see. I don't think that it's been independently verified enough or validated. I don't know where those MSME hubs exist today. If you know, please tell me. So the last one that I think could have a lasting impact, even though a lot of private businesses have actually started implementing this already, is the 70,000 naira minimum wage. There are so many private businesses that have already adjusted their salaries, because it's pretty obvious that their employees can no longer maintain the previous salaries that they had. So the minimum wage you would see most likely impact civil servants. And civil servants at the federal and civil servants at the state level that I can afford it. Now, there's still talk around whether some state governments and local government can actually afford to pay this 70,000 naira minimum wage. But albeit, if the government is able to pull this 70,000 naira minimum wage out and it works, I think you would see at least a little bit of boost in purchasing power of Nigerians, and that could also filter in positively to the wider economy because of the sort of the effect that it will create. So for me, again, even though 70,000 minimum wage is probably the best of the lot, it's still yet to be implemented.
Yeah, I mean, yet to be implemented, and you must also put in perspective the value of 70,000 naira today in 2024. Because in perspective, the value of the Naira. Many have compared to what 70,000 naira would have been in 2014 or in 2015 compared to what it is today. And from some of the things that you've said, it doesn't seem like any of these or a lot of these policies that have been mentioned really have a direct or a very positive effect on the reality or the economic reality of the average Nigerian. It feels like, the government is clutching at straws here and there and doing things to make itself look good, but not really putting the right perspectives in. But I want you to quickly respond to something. The very first one says that the government has raised its revenues to 9.1 trillion naira in the first half of 2024, more than double compared to the first half of 2023. But there's a report on the leadership newspapers that says the federal government misses 2.69 trillion naira quarter one revenue target as it earned 3.18 billion naira, or 318 billion naira, beg your pardon. It's from about 2 months ago. And this is from the Accountant General of the Federation, Oluwatoyin Medin, said that the federal government revenue inflows amounted to a total of 318 billion naira in the first quarter of the year 2024. So can we have these two statements at par? If federal government has already missed out on its revenue target, and then President Tinubu is claiming that we hit 9.1 trillion naira.
Obviously, I think there are two different things. In fact, more than two different things. So first of all, you need to ask yourself, which of the revenues are we speaking to? Are we talking about the federation revenue in general, or are we talking about FG's own revenue? It's important to distinguish the two. The federation revenue is the entire amount of money that accrues to the federal Federation of Nigeria. That's federal government, state, and local governments. And that is shared. And then you now have the FG's revenue, which is what you tend to see in the budget. So that's one factor that you need to distinguish. And secondly, you have budgets and then you have actual figures. Now, you can compare your actual figures to your budget, and then you can also compare your actual figures to your prior year figures. So I think what the president was comparing here is his actual figures with the prior year figure. So if you compare it to the actual budget, it could be a negative variance, but it could also be a positive variance when compared to the prior year. And so if you compare to the prior year, you would say to yourself, well, yes, I may not have hit my target revenue, but in terms of when you compare to the year before, I've actually done a lot better. So I think that is the difference here. And I guess maybe the paper didn't really explain that properly. But again, I explained why that happened. That probably happened because of the first subsidy removal that you've seen. And more importantly, we adjusted the FX rate. So that is a direct pass-through. I mean, think about it. Custom revenue used to be at 400 and something naira to the dollar. Now is at 160 to the dollar. So that's like 3 times. So you expect custom revenue to almost doubled or more than doubled over the year. So no surprises here that you're seeing government revenue rise to 9.1 trillion naira.
All right. It's a conversation that is still ongoing, and we hope that we can keep having you join us. Thank you so much for your time with us this morning, Ugodre Obi-Chukwu. And we look forward to having more pleasant conversations to see the economy recovering and that Nigerians feeling the impact directly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.